Dennis Stegwalt, President of the Housing Innovation Alliance. Glad to have you here as part of our third Tuesday series. This is the first one of 2022. We have a real exciting panel where we're going to get into some core innovations in core building systems with a group of entrepreneurs from around the world. Before we do that, and for those of you who may be new to our network, I just want to provide a little bit of background about who we are and what we do. So at the Housing Innovation Alliance, we're all about increasing the availability of attainable housing for the middle market. We do that by leveraging the production home builders' scale and volume throughout the marketplace. We're about 200 companies strong and just over 1,000 or so individuals driving that change. And we do that by leading market engagement activities just like the one we're hosting today. All of our market engagement activities throughout the course of the year are made possible by a fantastic group of financial supporters. That is our transformation or innovation partners. We want to thank them for the support throughout the course of that last year and look forward to more with them next year. Today's event is meant to be interactive. So one of the things we want to make sure happens is as you have questions or comments, please drop those directly into the chat box. Greg or myself will pull them into the conversations as appropriate as we go throughout the course of this session. And I want to give you a little bit of background about what this session is all about. So at the end of last year, we had our Future of Housing conversation. And in the course of that discussion, we had about a 4-hour dialogue around how we can paint some broad concepts around where the industry is going over the next 3, 5, and 10 years. In doing that, Greg and I had a chance to brainstorm a bit, well, because of Fifth Wall's involvement in those sessions. And it's great to have directional guidance, but how do we provide some near-term solutions that could be adopted and drive that change? So what we wanted to do is have a follow-up beginning of this year to those sessions with a group of entrepreneurs that are bringing those solutions to market. And that's really where we are and how this came about today. So consider this an extension of that conversation and a way to start taking measured steps towards driving real change in the residential built environment. Now, before we get started with the panel, and Greg Smithies from Fifth Wall is going to facilitate this for us, Greg will take us through and introduce us to all the panelists. But before he does that, I want to introduce him and Fifth Wall so that he can provide a little bit more context for this conversation and how this group of panelists came about. Greg's joining us as Fifth Wall's co-lead on the Clean Tech Group. They're one of the largest fundraisers in decarbonization in the residential built environment. So we're excited to have him here from that participation. And before Fifth Wall, Greg was a big part of BMW's iVentures group, leading their sustainability practice. So Greg's perfectly suited to help guide us through these conversations. With that, take it away, Greg.
Thanks, and thanks everybody for taking the time today, and also thanks to all of our panelists. Yeah, so just a little bit of background here on Fifth Wall, if we can hop over to these slides in case anybody is not familiar with us. Fifth Wall is the world's largest venture capital fund that's focused on what we call the built environment, but really think of that as construction, real estate, infrastructure, and more so energy, just given how much energy buildings consume. We've got about $3 billion under management. And probably what's most interesting to the folks on the line is similar to the Housing Innovation Alliance. The money that we have pulled together here to go and invest in breakthrough technologies for our industry is coming from the industry itself. So we pulled together about 90 of the world's largest owners, operators, and developers of commercial and residential real estate and infrastructure around the world. There are some of their logos up here on the slide. We're across about 15 countries. And just to give you a feel for sort of the size and the scope of the consortium that we pulled together, we account for about 20 to 23% of all of the homes that are built in the US, about 7.5 billion square feet of commercial real estate, about 1.5 billion of industrial, I think 1.5 million hotel rooms, 1.5 million multifamily units. So a very sizable consortium. And if you flip to the next slide, we invest across a number of different theses here, and we are investing in the next generation technologies to help our industry. We've got a North American real estate tech fund that's doing technologies such as software going into buildings. We've got a similar fund in Europe that's doing the same thing. We've got a retail fund, which is doing next generation direct to consumer technologies and people for our corporate LPs who own retail assets, for example. And then what's relevant today is that fourth leg of the stool there, climate tech. the real estate and construction industry accounts for about 40% of all of the CO2 emissions on the planet, right? I think if you ask the average Joe Blogs on the street, who is the big bad wolf industry, and most people would think it's transportation, but it turns out it's actually us, right? It's real estate and construction. We are the big bad wolf. And what is quite shocking for us as an industry is even if we realize that we are the problem, we do not have the technology at hand to solve that problem for ourselves. Meaning, even if we go out and install all of the best technology available to us today, use the best construction materials, all of those things, we can only probably solve about 50% of that problem. Right. So that is why we think it's incredibly important for us to be, as a venture capital fund, investing in new technologies, because we need new technologies to solve the other half of the equation here. And then also to bring with us the industry at large, because it doesn't matter if we can invent the technologies if the industry doesn't want to buy those technologies, right? So we really do see this as bringing industry and startups together through a venture capital fund. And that's the background there. So just a little bit of a high level on the folks who are going to be talking today. In alphabetical order, we've got Mehrdad Mahjoubi, who is the CEO of Orbital Systems. I think you're going to see a theme here. We've got a lot of rocket science around here. Orbital Systems is doing water recycling systems, and it's technology that was originally spun out of NASA. And Mehrdad, thank you very much for doing this late night. He's actually in Sweden at the moment. And he has a background in industrial design out of Lund University. He's a guest lecturer at Stanford's Graduate School of Business as well. We've also got Arch Rao. Arch is the CEO of Span, who makes smart electric panels. In transparency, Fifth Wall are investors in Span. We are not investors in the other two companies today. And Arch has got a very interesting background, having survived, I think, close on 5 years reporting to Elon Musk as a head of energy products at Tesla. I had a lot more hair before I worked for Elon. I don't know how Arch still has a full head of hair there after so many years working for the man. And then last but not least, we've got Michael Saxey, who's the CEO of Dandelion Energy. Dandelion are working on ground source or geothermal heat pumps for buildings. And this is also a very storied company. It's a spin out of Google's Moonshot Factory, or Alphabet's Moonshot Factory. And Michael's had a fantastic career in and around the energy and efficiency space, spending, I think, close on about 8 years at O-Power, which is a company that I'm sure lots of folks will know. And he's a reformed lawyer. So, maybe he can tell us why you go and get a Harvard law degree if you're not going to go and use it. So with that, would like to hand it off to Arch to talk to us about Span. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for inviting me to join. Thanks for supporting our adventures. And Dennis and Betsy, thanks for having me on as well. Well, it's nice to meet everybody here. I think the common theme across Dandelion, Orbital, and us is we're all painfully aware of the need for decarbonization. And we, like Greg, have seen that the empirical data points towards us having to rethink our built environment or how we power our daily lives. And that's part of the core mission here at Span. So flip over to the next slide here, Dennis. The core, our raison d'etre at Span here is we want to accelerate electrification. Electrification is the exercise of essentially transitioning all of our devices, appliances from fossil-based sources like natural gas to fully electric sources. And this is driven by the belief that if we generate enough clean renewable energy, then and if you can convert all of our loads from gas to electric, then we could have a largely decarbonized built environment. And having spent the last decade and a half in the energy space, in the renewable energy space, ranging from wind power generation to energy efficiency to commercial energy metering, to then subsequently spending some time at Tesla designing and developing energy storage systems, I came to the realization that if we cannot enable homes and our everyday lives to be less carbon intense, then we're really missing the boat here on our effort to buck the trend on climate change. And to enable that, if you look at the home as an ecosystem, it becomes very painfully obvious that the home electrical panel is one that has seen very little innovation in nearly a century now. And that is often the bottleneck for customers making that transition to a fully electric home. That's where we started about 3.5 years ago, and I'm happy to share a bit more about our products. Dennis, if you go to the next slide here. What's been helping us over the last decade, and more importantly, over the last half a decade, is not just the adoption of technologies like solar, which allow us to generate clean electrons on our rooftops, but the adoption of electric vehicles, which actually help us step away from our dependency on petroleum or fossil fuels for everyday transportation, or the ability for us to store those electrons locally with home batteries and then displace loads in our homes with all electric alternatives of natural gas appliances. So if you think about it, every day when you cook, when we heat our water, when we heat our living environment, we're actually consuming a significant amount of fossil fuels. So you combine what we consume in an average American home with how much you drive, that actually represents about 42% of all carbon emissions that we see here in the United States. But now that there are technologies like solar, like energy storage, and like electric vehicles that are accelerating quite rapidly from an R&D standpoint, and from an adoption standpoint, we've seen that the cost has come down, and that's now driving a very unique problem, that homes are not currently designed to be able to accept the vast or the significant pace at which these technologies are being deployed in home. And very simply put, it's a problem of the traditional electrical panel was not designed for a home that had a 10 kilowatt or 20 kilowatt charging system for your car. It wasn't designed to have a 15 kilowatt hour or 20 kilowatt hour battery in your home, not to mention, of course, another 10 kilowatt hour solar system on your roof. The largest appliance that was construed of a decade or a couple of decades ago, excuse me, was an air conditioning system, right? That was roughly a 5 kilowatt air conditioning system. So often we found that the home electrical panel is something that needed to be upgraded or replaced, and that became essentially the hypothesis that we've been proving out over the last few years. Is if you have to change your home electrical panel, why not make it a more capable, why not make it a smarter electrical panel that provides you both the visibility and the control required to then fully decarbonize? Going to the next slide here. And this is sort of illustrated in this very simple line diagram. The electrical panel sits in a very unique place in a home and on the grid, right? It's not just the device that sits between the energy coming from your utility and all the energy being distributed within your home. It's also the device that serves as the connection between renewable generation like solar and all of your emerging loads like electric vehicle charging. It's also the device that connects all AC appliances like your refrigerators, your air conditioning systems, your washer dryers, but also increasingly DC devices like, again, your solar system, your DC fast chargers in your home. And it's also uniquely positioned to be a device that can be owned or co-owned by a utility, but also provide value to the homeowner. It sits at that physical interface between the home and the external grid. So for a lot of reasons, this seemed like the most obvious device that was ripe for disruption. And over the last 3.5 years, we've been reinventing the panel to be a whole lot more than just a safety device or a fault protection device. So let me tell you about what our panel can do today. Dennis, if you go to the next slide. All right. So what does it mean to reinvent the electrical panel? So those of you that are obviously in the construction space that build homes are very aware of the fact that this is a necessary part of your design stage. It's a very necessary part of your electrical build out. The panel receives between 100 and 400 amps of power coming in from the utility as its main feed, and then it has a bus bar that then distributes the power downstream to all of the different circuits in your home, be it your lighting circuits, your receptacles in your home, and all of your large appliances. Traditionally, this has just been a passive analog device with circuit breakers that can trip in the event that there is a fault event, like when there's overcurrent being drawn or a ground fault or an arc fault that's detected. What we've successfully done is we have embedded into this panel, the ability for us to very granularly measure every single circuit, but also to control or turn off every single circuit without having to trip your breaker. What this allows us to do is not only disconnect circuits when it's not safe to operate, but also give customers a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of what circuits in their homes are powered when you're in an outage, for example, which we're seeing increasingly often now. What we've also successfully done is embedded this panel with what we're calling a grid disconnect. So instead of having to get a whole lot of additional equipment to be able to transfer power from the grid to your on-site local power, we've built into it an automatic grid disconnect that senses when your external grid is either about to fail or about to endure a brownout, and then switches gracefully to local power that you might have in the form of solar or storage, as the case may be. In addition to that, we believe that there's an incredible opportunity for us to make this sort of the central gateway for all forms of data and energy going in and out of your home. So we've placed in it a very capable high-end compute that can communicate over wireless, over cellular. So no matter what the state of power is, no matter what the state of your internet service provider is, you're able to always stay connected to your home. You're able to always stay connected to the appliances in your home through our product. I think we have a short video that describes what you can do with it through an app. Dennis, I don't hear the audio in case you're able to turn that on. Thanks, Dennis. One of the incredibly important things to do when building new technology, and I learned this firsthand building products at Tesla, is to make them sexy. And I think our hardware is an incredible improvement over what was not a very tall bar to cross with a traditional electrical panel, which is just a gray sheet metal box. But we've also spent a tremendous amount of effort to ensure that the technology, the software that the customer engages with is really, really powerful. So for us, we have tried to stay away from inundating customers with charts and graphs, but instead focus on the things that matter most. So giving them real-time visibility and real-time controls over what's happening within their home, but also start to engage them in ways that energy management systems traditionally have failed to do, which is give them information that can help them improve their quality of life. For example, what you might have captured in the glimpse that you saw in the video here is we're now starting to identify anomalies in behaviors of devices in your home. So if your refrigerator has a compressor that's about to fail, or if your air conditioning system has an imbalance in voltage between line 1 and line 2, these are things that we can push as a notification to the homeowner, but it can also be served up as a notification to service providers, be it the home builder, or be it other service providers that the homeowner wants to share that information with. One other feature that you probably saw over here, which is perhaps the most compelling feature for our product set available in the market today, is if you have a storage system, this is the only product in the market that allows you to dynamically reconfigure what subset of your home is powered. during that outage event. And this is something, unfortunately, I've endured firsthand about 3 times this past year when in Northern California, we had rolling outages, sometimes for a few hours, sometimes for a few days at a time, where SPAN gives me the ability to not just see exactly how much power I have available or how much energy I have available and how many hours and minutes I have available for my battery backup, but also switch to circuits that are important for me to keep on at that point in time, as opposed to every other solution out there today, which gives you only a static certain number of circuits that can be backed up during an outage. Thanks, Greg, for fielding questions as I'm speaking here. I'm obviously happy to come back to some of these questions towards the end as well. So we're really excited about this product that we've had in the market now for a year and a half or so. We're actually already in our 2nd generation product, and we're now actively scaling up deployments to a large number of partners, mainly partners that have been deploying solar and storage, but that solve for the retrofit market. But one of the reasons why this Housing Alliance call is exciting for me and for SPAN is we're looking to engage with partners as we scale up beyond traditional energy providers to now home builders and service providers as well. If you go to the next slide, so that's the product that we've had. This is the video again. If you go to the next slide, Dennis. The panel is the product that we've had in the marketplace for some time. We enable a lot of functionality both through the hardware and the software. And by design, this is a piece of technology that keeps improving over time. So it's designed to receive over-the-air software updates. It's designed to understand your home better over time, and it gives you complete transparency and control in real time. But thinking about products going beyond the panel, if you go to the next slide, Dennis, we are working on, we just recently announced a home EV charger. So if you play the video. Thanks, Dennis. And as you can probably tell, like we are more than just an electric panel company. We are a company that's focused on enabling homes to be fully electric. And empirically, and just looking at the market data, you can see that one of the first steps that most people take towards decarbonizing is switching from a petroleum or diesel car to an electric car. And that's why we built a device that can pair incredibly well with our panel. That's a level 2 charger. And this is, we announced this late last year, and we're going to be bringing this to market here in just a few months. And this, we think, is an incredibly important piece of technology for every single home. Most customers that want to adopt an electric car are often stymied by the cost and the limitations of what their home can offer in terms of a charging infrastructure for the electric cars. So it's not just about having the vehicle, it's also knowing that 80% of these electric car owners are going to charge their cars at home. We designed a product that, again, far surpasses what's out there in terms of home charging. And we think this will provide the best charging experience for the customer at home. And this is attained by doing 2 things. One, because of the amount of control we have both in the panel and in our charger, we can ensure that either retrofit homes or new build homes do not require an upsizing of the service. So you don't have to go from 200 amps to 400 amps just to be able to move to the next marginal electric appliance. And second, because of the fact that we can control every single appliance or circuit within the panel, we can allow you to charge in a much smarter way. So depending on how fast you want to charge, we could either turn off or turn down certain appliances in your home, and we can apply the same degree of control to the rate of charge through our charger as well. So we think this will be a fundamental unlock for a lot of customers that want to move towards a more carbon neutral lifestyle. And we're really excited about these two products. We've got a whole host of other products coming down the pipe, and we're looking to partner with if you look at the next slide, we've got a few hundred partners that are already deploying our product today. And these are channel partners that can buy our hardware and bundle it to their customers, either as a finance solution or as part of a new build, or as part of a solar installation, or in some cases as part of a heat pump installation. And we're looking to expand this network as we try to decarbonize and electrify more homes. I think I'm pretty much at time here. Thanks so much for your time. I'm obviously happy to answer questions that you guys have either now or towards the end of the rest of the talk.
Yeah, I think Arch, there are a bunch of questions that folks have. I ran out of all of the information I have as not being the CEO of the company. So maybe you can go in there and answer some of the more technical questions. We'll also come back to verbal questions towards the end. Okay, handing off to Michael Saxey for Dandelion.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, guys, and excited to share more about Dandelion. If you could go to the next slide, please. So Dandelion was born inside Google X, and really what the problem we're focused on solving is finding a source of sustainable heat for homes. When you look at how we heat our homes, it's primarily by burning something. We burn a lot of natural gas to heat our homes. In the Northeast, where I am, we burn a lot of fuel oil and propane, remarkably even wood. And then when you look at electricity, the electric options have some limitations. So, electric resistance heating is really inefficient. And air source heat pumps, which we're huge fans of, but they cause potentially grid challenges. We're not built for a grid that is all powered by air source heat pumps. And they also struggle with extreme temperatures. So if you go to the next slide, please. We see this as something where it's not just us, but it is large institutional players who are looking at this dynamic and changing their strategies. So, for the folks on this call who are focused on, building homes, as I suspect many of you are, one thing I think you should have a strategy for is, what do you do when the grid doesn't extend, when the natural gas grid is not going to extend to a new development? And we are seeing that already in parts of the Northeast. The chairman of Con Ed has said, we're not going to be investing further in these types of resources. And there's a good reason for that. The reason is that, utilities and their regulators expect natural gas resources to earn a rate of return for 80 to 100 years. And I think very few of us believe that we are likely to be using natural gas in 80 to 100 years. So we need to find a new direction. Next slide, please. And in particular, for Dandelion, that need is most focused within the Northeast. So it's really staggering just when you look at how many homes continue heating their themselves today with fuel oil or propane. There are 3.1 million homes just in New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And if you look at a county by county map, it really runs right along the Acela corridor. These are generally in suburbs of large cities where there were huge numbers of homes built in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And they're burning a fuel that's very expensive, that's inconvenient for them. I can tell you a lot of people in the Northeast ran out of fuel oil this weekend. It was quite cold, and it's been hard to get deliveries out. And then we're seeing, as part of that, a broader expansion into where utilities are reluctant to extend natural gas. So that's the market that Dandelion's focused on. And if you could go to the next slide. And so really, we're the technology we're focused on is one that's been around for some time, but has never really been brought to scale. And that's geothermal or ground source heat pumps. So ground source heat pumps are known to be the most efficient way to heat and cool homes, but the big challenge has really been the upfront cost. They simply cost more to install, and then you see the benefits over the lifetime of the home. So we have made this much simpler for homeowners, and our product approach really focuses on three things. If you could go to the next slide. So first is, one of the real drivers of cost is that most ground loop systems for geothermal are oversized. There's good reason for that, because so a geothermal system really has two components. There's the ground loop, which is the heat exchanger buried in the ground, and then there's the heat pump, which is inside the home. For the ground loop, most installers just simply don't know what the properties of the soil are that they're digging into. And so they use a rule of thumb. They plan for the worst case scenario, and that leads to a higher cost. We have software that is proprietary to us, that is used by most commercial geothermal installers. And really, it provides the accuracy of a soil sample without doing the work. And that allows us to be the low-cost provider every time. And really, our goal isn't to compete with the smaller companies that are out there doing this, but just bend the cost of this product overall down to a point where we are competing consistently with natural gas. And data is a big part of that. Next slide, please. Another big part of that is simply the size of the equipment. So most geothermal systems are installed using wheeled water well rigs. They weigh 50,000 pounds. They have a 43-foot turning radius, and they simply cannot access most homes. You need quite a large home, or a home that has a fortuitously situated driveway in order to allow a wheeled rig onto your property. We have been bringing much smaller equipment. This is equipment that's not proprietary to us, but it is a reflection of our business model. And really what that allows us to do is get into much more typically sized suburban homes. And this is something where this is the approach that has been used for a decade in Sweden and other parts of in other Nordic countries. We are constantly pushing the drilling industry to adopt this type of equipment, and we will send them jobs all day long. But it's a really critical component, because smaller equipment gets into smaller yards, and half the jobs we sell require smaller equipment. If you go to the next slide, please. And then the last part is really around the heat pump itself. And traditionally, ground source heat pumps, really all heat pumps, have been focused on air conditioning first. They're designed to be installed in new homes. And you have very large companies for whom this is a fairly small part of the market. We are in the process of developing a proprietary heat pump built from the ground up. It's designed to be a heater first. It's designed to look to the home like an oil furnace. So an oil furnace distributes air at 165 degrees. Air source or heat pumps typically distribute air at 110 degrees. Our heat pump will distribute air at 125 degrees with 200 CFM. And that's going to make it work in a number of homes where they currently don't have the ductwork to fit with a heat pump. And so that will be coming to market very soon. Next slide, please. Our approach with customers is that, this is, as much as I'm motivated and many others are motivated by decreasing our footprint and having a positive impact. For most customers, this is a dollars and cents issue. It is a question of how long is the payback going to be, and how does it work for the economics of my family? And really, there are two parts that are critical here. First, if you're financing, you save money on day one. Second, if you're paying with cash, it's a 7-year payback. And increasingly, there's evidence showing that this is resulting in higher home values. And I'll say that for those in the new construction space, we are developing a lease model that will allow us to own the ground loops. That means that the cost is comparable to a traditional HVAC system, and we will just act as the utility for the homeowner. And that's something that we're excited to be able to do going forward. Next slide, please. Finally, we see this as something where it's got to be customer friendly, and these are difficult projects to install. It's easy for customers to have a negative experience. We're very focused on that, and we see tremendous customer satisfaction scores as a result. And really, and the number one thing actually that we hear is that customers are surprised by how much more comfortable their home feels with ground source heating. It's hard for us to quantify exactly what is the source of that, but we believe that it's a reflection of the fact that instead of having a furnace cycling on and off all day long and having very hot air and then it cooling off with lower humidity levels, that the more constant temperature of a heat pump is more comfortable to live in. Next slide. I think this is my last one. Yeah, and that's it. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions. Sorry I couldn't offer the dance music that Arch did, but looking forward to talking with you all over the next hour.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. And folks, just a reminder, you can throw your questions either into the chat or into the Q&A. If we can't answer them in the chat by text, we will be going through them towards the end of this call verbally. And then last but certainly not least, Mehrdad from Orbital Systems, over to you.
Thank you all. Nice to be here. I have tested negative each day the last 3 days, but I think I have the seasonal, flu instead. So my sound is a little bit worn off. Wait, let me see. Can you flip the page, please? So I founded Orbital back in 2012. At the time, I was based out of Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, looking at designing ways which we could sustain an earthly living standard when we colonize Mars. So a little bit background around that is that we don't typically think about the facts that most astronauts are spending time wearing a diaper and eating food through a straw. And it's doable if you're a professional, up in a couple of weeks. But if you're going to sustain a complete life on Mars, or even just a journey of a couple of years, you would want to have a bit nicer, more relatable lifestyle. So I was spending my time looking at how we could enable such thing. And one of the methodologies, let's say, when at NASA was to let's look at how we solve these issues on Earth, and let's not repeat the mistakes, basically. And in terms of water, which is basically what we're doing or working with, if you flip the page, please. Perfect. So I think in order to understand the massive opportunity around demand side water, the easiest way is to look at the journey we've walked in terms of the energy sector, where just a couple of decades ago, all of the money spent, the engineering, power spent, everything in terms of energy was focused on the supply side. If you were, it didn't matter if you were you were a businessman or an engineer. Basically, your focus was how you could increase supply. A couple of decades ago, we realized that it's not just enough to pump up more oil and gas. We actually need to be more efficient about how we use the energy. Similarly, if we look at the journey we've walked in terms of the water industry, we haven't really done anything on the demand side yet. The water towers are basically the same kind of principle as the aqueducts that are several thousand years old. and we kind of just pass this buck to taxpayer funded utilities. And this is where Orbital comes in. We are essentially driving a paradigm shift in what we call the demand side of water. If you please flip the page. Our first product is the world's first circular shower, meaning that it loops the water in real time. And by looping the water in real time, we can save more than 90% of the water, 80% of the energy used. But most importantly, at the same time, we can increase the user experience. And the user experience when using water in our homes can typically be defined in 3 parameters. Number one, you want to have clean water. In that sense, our water is cleaner than regular tap water. The second one is flow rate, where our flow can be double what is legally allowed in the state of California, for example, where you have quite crappy flow rates due to all kinds of legislation. And the third one is temperature stability, where it's much more precise than regular showers because it's digitally monitored and digitally controlled. Please flip the page. Comparing this kind of technology to other similar investments into the home, you will see that the ROI is quite different. Obviously, there are a bunch of financing solutions and government incentive models that could come with other kind of technologies. But I think what this slide illustrates the most is that what currently has faster ROIs, one example would be LEDs, are not really considered technology anymore. They're just considered, they're just taken for granted. And I think also what this slide shows is that we've kind of picked the low-hanging fruit in the energy side, and now we're on this long trek of trying to really, climb up the tree. While in terms of the water, we're still flushing our toilets with drinking water. We're still flushing, 50 gallons for a 20-minute shower. So way easier to dig on those lands. Next slide, please. So we launched our first commercial product back in 2018. We've seen a pretty significant growth driven mainly by fundamentals like saving water, meaning saving on your utility bill. If you're a real estate owner, you can increase your net operating income, which obviously is a benefit if you're valuing your real estate portfolio based on your NOI. And in places where you can't really trust the source of the water, this will guarantee that there's a clean water all the time. And the main issue we get, the best feedback on is really the user experience. Similar to what I, just heard, that even though we're rational, we want to believe that we're rational human beings, it's most of the time the emotional response that is, that we're getting the most feedback on. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we're launching our second product this year. So what we're seeing is essentially doing what I did for NASA, basically tying the whole demand side of water. So we drastically reduced the personal water use on a daily basis. And again, while lowering resources use, always making sure we enhance the user experience, because as soon as you compromise on the user experience, you're going to miss out the mass market. And there are tons of solutions out there where you are asking people to be more green or more, save more resources, but at the cost of compromise. And then, they simply haven't really been so attractive in the market. Next slide, please. That was the last one. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Fantastic. No, thanks very much to Medad and Michael and Arch. This was great. So encourage everybody to throw any questions you have into the Q&A or the chat. But whilst we're waiting for that to happen, I am just going to do a little bit of a lightning round here around questions to everybody. I've noticed a bunch of questions that are basically sort of the standards on, how much and how many of these things can you make and sort of where are you in go-to-market. So let's just do a first question in the order you guys presented in. So Arch, Michael, and then Merdad. On commercialization, do you have product in market? Where are you selling? Are you supply constrained? Just those sorts of items.
Yeah, we are in market with our second generation panel. The EV charger will be in market in Q2 this year. We've already deployed a large number of panels, and we are actually not supply constrained because we anticipated this year would be a growth year for us. And we have, I think we positioned ourselves reasonably well to supply 10,000 to 20,000 systems at least this upcoming year, this year, 2022. In terms of, I think somebody had asked about the price. Our panel retails for $3,500, but needless to say, when we work with channel partners, we have a channel partner price or a wholesaler price if it's a distributor, and our EV charger is set to retail for $500 as an accessory to the panel. Happy to talk more about that as well when we think about new home builds, and especially when we're talking about a large number of new homes being built simultaneously. In terms of markets we're available in, we are actually available across the US right now. We've already installed systems in over 30 states here in the US, including Puerto Rico. And we are either able to offer it just as a hardware solution, or in some cases, we're able to partner with electricians. Where we have a growing network of electrical contractors that can do the installation on your behalf, if you like. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Michael.
Yeah, so we are focused in the Northeast, New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts at present. We are seeing tremendous demand, and so we do have a few supply constraints. Like our year in many ways is largely booked from a revenue standpoint, not unlike what Merdad was indicating. So our challenge is to deliver on that revenue. And so we are extraordinarily focused on scaling that. And then, I would say that the other thing that we are very focused on, is really expanding our relationships. So we have products in market. The heat pump I described is not yet in market. That's something where we have prototyped it, tested out the performance of it, and are now working with a contract manufacturer to bring that one to market. I'd say the other thing is our capacity is greater on the new construction side, where there are economies of scale that come into play, and so we are certainly interested in those conversations.
Great, thanks. And Merdad?
What was the question, Greg?
Yeah, sorry, it's been a while. Where are you in terms of capacity? Are you selling product right now? And where are you selling?
Yeah, so we've been selling the last couple of years. We're mainly selling in Northern Europe. The pandemic made us kind of roll back and focus on our core markets. I'm currently in Sweden, as you know. It's an American company, but engineering and HQ is in Sweden. I would say our main constraint or bottleneck would in general be installers in new regions, mainly because I don't see, at least for the next couple of years, production be a constraint. I don't see, we have more demand that then we can find third-party installers. That would be the best way to phrase it. And it's not that it's a hard product to install, but one needs to take into consideration that every project is a bigger project than just installing our tech. Typically, it's either a full refurb of a bathroom, or it's a new building in general. And because we're not running around installing ourselves, there are investments into each region we want to be active in before we can get the ecosystem up and running by itself. So installation, and similar to what I heard Art say is like our natural channel partner would be someone like a solar panel installer or someone that is installing battery packs, rather than the classic retailer, let's say, that is just warehousing products and selling eyesight shelves or back at the store shelves. So and those I would say are pretty regional. You don't find installer firms that are like nationwide or across complete continent. You typically find them dominant, but only within a small city, either a state or a city or part of a state. So yeah.
Yep, great. And then I'm going to take this one in reverse. But what do you think the real impact of your product can be over the next 5 to 10 years, sort of macro scale, but then also on a micro scale on a per home or a per development project sort of basis? And I'm Mehrdad, I'm going to start with you because you are the one who's kind of not energy here, right? And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about water, but I'm sitting here on the west coast of America, the town just north of me, Mendocino. This summer, the whole town ran out of water. They were trucking water in, right? So yeah, I think maybe let's start with the water thing because not a lot of people think about this.
Sure. So I mean, when it comes to water, it's like obviously I'm biased, but I can tell you that this is pretty revolutionary in terms of the sheer amounts, because 2/3 of the water is going to agriculture. And that's kind of fine because it's going back into the groundwater and coming back up with the rain and whatnot. About 20% goes into what is called, it's labeled as industry, but that can be anything from, paper plants to jeans manufacturing in Bangladesh to pharma industry. It's really, really broad. About 10% goes into what is called the home. And almost half of that is the shower, and then another 25% is toilet and laundry, etc. But that's what I'm just telling you about the averages in terms of human society. But if you zoom in to a city where there's not that much agriculture going on within the city center, you can imagine how much, and you don't have any paper plants or jeans plants within a city. You suddenly are looking at 80-90% of that city's water being used in the homes. And by radically being able to make that water use more efficient, it alleviates the overall stress on the infrastructure. And that's basically where I'm going at, because the last couple of 100 years, we've just taken for granted that every person in US is going to use about 100 gallons a day. And then as urbanization has increased, we've just increased the size of the plants, of the utilities, treatment centers, and increased tax, increased the water tariffs, and haven't thought more about it. But what this will change is that instead of just investing more into the supply, we can unlock more by making the demand side more efficient. And that's basically where we're going. And I view this as pretty straightforward and a win-win solution. But the reason why it hasn't been done before is that it's not a problem of personal fault. It's more of a system error, design flaw that was done a couple of 100 years ago, and we simply haven't addressed it since, because it's been run by other people, paid by other people, etc.
Yep. Yeah, that's fascinating. Huge potential impact here. And yeah, I also didn't mention, I live on a farm with a well, and my well was dry all of the summer. So I've been trucking water in. I'm kind of living on the front end of this. It's like, if it's not fire, I've run out of water, and those two things don't go well together. Okay, Michael, over to you. Sort of overall macro impact that you think your product can drive, and then maybe on a more micro scale on a sort of per house basis.
Well, first of all, it sounds like Greg also happens to live in a beautiful place. So
yes,
but here's how I think about this. There's a lot of discussion, appropriate discussion, about electrify everything, and the reason to do that is because our the real thought there is we electrify everything, then we make the electric grid a lot more efficient, and then that becomes the way we get to a sustainable position from a climate standpoint. And if you look at some of the research, like some of the stuff Saul Griffith has put together, one of the core assumptions in there is that heat pumps are going to double in their efficiency. How are they going to do that? That's not an easy thing. And so, like, we talked, I won't name names, but the senior vice president for planning at a large Midwestern utility, electric utility, mind you, who was like, look, electrifying everything is great, but if we electrify everything with air source or comparable technologies, I need 5 times the peak capacity of what I have now. Like, that's just not going to happen. They're not going to be able to build 5 times that 5 times capacity. So like, so we really have to look at this, in my view, from the efficiency standpoint in conjunction with the electrification standpoint. And ultimately, geothermal is an efficient technology because it's exchanging heat with the ground. So we see it as, if we really want to electrify everything and we're really serious about it, then there's, we really don't see another option. Geothermal uses 20% as much energy to heat and 70% as much energy to cool. That's a big impact. If you want to think about it from a more micro standpoint, was frankly a very real life test case. So, last winter, Texas froze, and millions of people lost power. There's a geothermal community down there called Whisper Valley, which some of you may have heard of or been involved with. Whisper Valley didn't lose power. That's not because they were on some separate independent grid, but among other things, that's a geothermal community. And when the system operators look at what's going on, they see, okay, I can get 500 homes over here for a unit of energy, or I can get 100 homes over there. I'm going to choose the 500 over the 100 every time. And so, like, to me, that's how that's the calculus that I think everyone is going to end up doing, unfortunately. And then, for builders, it really is just a question of lining up the cost, because if you can get it so that the customer is paying in line with when they're seeing the benefits, it's a no-brainer, because you've set up a system that is more stable, and costs a lot less to operate. So that's our perspective.
Yep, perfect. And over to you, Arch. Do you need to refresh on the question?
No, I think I remember. Or I'll pontificate in the general sort of direction that Michael and Nadat have been doing. So look, I think the general consensus is that this is an infrastructure problem, and I think rethinking aging infrastructure is a fairly complex problem to overcome easily, right? Much like the water supply system hasn't been rethought of in generations now, the electrical supply system also hasn't. And the way we rethink it, like Michael suggested, or Michael indicated, is you go talk to an electric utility, they're going to say, hang on a second, I'm going to beef up my supply to think about the worst case scenario, and that's going to cost me 5 times as much money as I've already poured into an otherwise failing infrastructure, right? So I think the crux of it is we have very unique opportunity, not just as technology companies, but as suppliers of homes, right, to address the opportunity directly where the demand is. So homeowners are going to want a few fundamental things. They're going to not want their convenience to be impacted in any way. They're going to want to continue to adopt technologies that they think are neat and cool and sexy. These are going to be electric cars and heat pumps and better shower systems, right? And those things cannot be gated by traditional infrastructure limitations. So the only way to really address that is, I think, for home builders like you guys to sort of lean into it and say, we're going to give the customers the most flexibility. And if you give them that flexibility and choice, cost no longer becomes a barrier, especially when you think about a new build where you're spending, where we live, a couple of $1 million per home, or even several hundreds of thousands of dollars for middle income households. It's no longer a factor when you're saying we're going to put in the smartest piece of technology, like let's say a span panel, in your home at the outset, because when you think about the lifespan of a home, like a 30-year lifespan, a few $1,000s is marginal cost, or in fact, it ends up paying back for itself very easily because you no longer now have to upgrade your entire service just to get that electric car charger or heat pump installed in your home, right? Or that you avoided, even 2 outages in a 5-year span, and that has protected your family in a critical event, right? So I think that's how we approach it. When you look at it from that point of view, there's single family homes alone in the US. There's about 72 million single family homes, and if you think about multifamily, now you're talking about north of 100 million homes that can be, in fact should be electrified. And electrification is not a 1 or 0 value proposition. It's not like you're either fully electric or you're not. These are going to happen through different sort of journeys. And that's really what SPAN is set out to do. And we expect to be in a couple of million homes over the course of this decade. And that's what I'm sure our friends here at Dandelion and Orbital are setting out to do as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Arch. And actually, you alluded to something here that I think maybe we haven't touched on, which is multifamily versus single family. I think a lot of the conversation to date has been just about a single family, or the examples have been single family. But I know just given the audience here, we do have a significant number of multifamily folks on the line as well. So if we could also just do a quick run through, and you could give your applicability to multifamily versus single family. And Mehdi, starting with you.
Sure. I mean, majority of our clients are the multifamily homes, either owners or builders, because and the reason why is simply because everything, all the benefits also scales with as the building gets larger. So, for example, the easiest, most straightforward example I can give you is that if you're building your own villa, and you have a 100-gallon boiler, if you're putting in an Orbital Systems product, you can decrease the size of that boiler 10 times, because there is no other single product within the home that is in need of such amounts of hot water. The same applies if you're building a 100 unit multifamily home. You can decrease the whole size of the hot water system within that. And if you're renting it out and you're valuing your real estate based on the net operating income, which is at least what they're doing here in Europe, the savings, you have the ROI or payback time, that's one thing. That could be slightly longer in terms of a multifamily home, because not everybody is taking a shower every day. But on the other hand, the multiple you're getting on your NOI when you're pricing your real estate, it's 20 times, 30 times, and that's one of the reasons why it's been so popular within the larger multifamily home builders. Yeah.
Yep, great, Michael.
Yeah. So ground source heat pumps can be used in multifamily, and that right now is not our sweet spot. Just to be perfectly frank about it, our success is going to be when we're doing a few thousand, maybe 10,000 single family homes a year, but it's 100% applicable. And one of the things we will be considering is whether if multifamily installers want to use our heat pump in time, then of course we'll be open to that. I have to say also, I want SPAN and Orbital for my house. I love hearing about this stuff. It's so great.
Yeah, well, happy to set you up with one, Mike.
Please.
Yeah, the question about multifamily, Greg. We, like many earlier stage companies, we're starting with this we started with a relatively premium version of the product targeted at a market segment that tends to be price insensitive. We are now ready. We're getting to that stage of company now where we are ready to start partnering with multifamily builders to talk about how we deploy our Gen 3 next generation product that we're set to launch early next year, which from a project development standpoint might line up well with some of the projects you guys are working on. It'll be a smaller version of the panel, therefore cheaper, because most apartments don't require 32 circuits. You're fairly well serviced by a 16 or 20 breaker panel circuit. And what's really neat is we're actually designing these to also be interoperable. So it'll be a network. If you have 100 apartments with 100 span panels in them, they all communicate with one another, and has that added benefit of lowering your service capacity. Again, very analogous to what Mehrdad talked about, where you can lower the size of the large scale heating system you have for the water in the building. So we'll have a product for this early next year. We're happy to start talking about partnerships now so that we can be lined up to deploy these at scale when projects come online.
Yep, great stuff. And okay, let's maybe do one wrap question before we lose everybody. And this would just be kind of a Arch, you started talking about this, but next sort of 5-10 years, what do you think your product evolution looks like? What other products do you have on the sort of more distant roadmap? What can we look out for in the future from you? And we'll just go starting with Arch here.
Yeah, I don't want to disclose too much of our roadmap, but I think at a high level, we touched on the fact that we're going to need products that can go into every type of home. It's not just single family homes, but multi-family homes as well. There's a similar sort of need for electric vehicle charging or having to upgrade service requirements in commercial or at least small commercial facilities. So you can at least think about market verticals that we'll go into with panel and panel related products. We intend to also have newer versions of home EV charging. Somebody in the chat asked about bidirectionality. I think the ability to be able to not necessarily power the grid from your vehicle, but at the very least power some portion of your home from a vehicle will be an attractive feature, and we fully intend to support that initially with a small subset of OEMs, but over time to be agnostic of the vehicle itself. And then I think we see a continued proliferation of large DC appliances in your home, right? Be it solar generation, home batteries, EV charging, and then some. And we'll enable that both through hardware innovation, but also software integration with existing technology leaders, be it folks like Dandelion or other home appliance and control solutions like Google, Amazon, etc.
Great, Michael.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. We think about it really two components. So the first is the hardware, and we're going to be looking at improving the ground heat exchange. So anything we can do to make that not less drilling dependent is going to just expand the potential of the market for us. And so that's something we're doing a lot of investigation around. And then we will be evolving the heat pump, going to a split system, moving components outside so that there can be easier and easier installation. That's the way we're looking at it on the hardware side. And then, the other part that I think is important that I've touched on a few times is just like, we really believe financing is critical to how everything like this operates. I switched cell phone carriers recently because my daughter lost her phone and we needed a new one. And at no point was I ever like, I'm going to pay Verizon $17,000 over the next 7 years. It was always like, I'm going to pay them $160 a month. And like, that's how people are going to think about these in their home as well. And so continuing to be creative and thoughtful on the financing side is going to be a continued focus.
Yep, absolutely. And Mehrdad, just to take us home here.
Sure. Within 5 years, we'll be like Span, but for water. Jokes aside. No, essentially, so we're launching, what we're doing is the Orbital core has the capabilities of purifying water to cleaner than tap water. It has the abilities to in real time analyze water quality 20 times per second, and modifying the temperature, the flow rate. And essentially we're launching applications. So, we have the Orbital shower now, we're going to launch the Orbital tap, the Orbital laundry, but essentially going forward 5 years or even 5 to 10 years, it will be the, again, it's not that far off what, Span is. It's going to basically be the demand side management of water. So instead of having drinking water now in the toilet, you're going to have clean enough water to flush the toilet. Instead of having drinking water when you're washing your clothes, you don't need drinking water to wash your clothes. You need clean enough water to get your clothes, clean. So basically partitioning the water for the home for each purpose of use. So and so what that makes it possible. So the benefit is that you're going to have a better experience and less resources used. And you can't get there with an app, like there are tons of apps that are, going to guide you or whatever, nudge you. But like you actually need to be in the home, you need to purify the water, you need to pump the water, manage the, thermodynamics. And, with the first product, we've already put in all of the tools. And now it's just for us to come up with modules, basically valves and electronic boards that are connected. That's where I see Orbital.
Yeah, that's great. Well, with that is a wrap. So first off, thank you to all of our panelists, especially for Mehrdad doing this so late over in Europe. But very insightful comments and some truly exciting products. And Dennis, back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, everyone. This was fantastic. Really appreciate you taking the time. You did a great job of kind of keeping track of all that conversation that was happening in the chat box. So appreciate you interacting there. One of the things we will do here in the near future is we'll circulate, if it's okay with everybody, contact information as introductions come through us. And Greg, not to put you on the spot, but just to kind of wrap up, we were able to fire off to everybody else. But I'd love to hear if you have kind of a concise key takeaway or an action, let's say a call to action for the industry here in our network as they walk away with, after meeting these three entrepreneurs, getting to connect with yourself, what's kind of a call to action we can share with our network?
Yeah, I think Mehrdad actually said something very interesting, right? When you have a more efficient building, typically your net operating costs is way lower, and most of us, if we're owners of large portfolios, right? That's flowing straight directly through to your NAV, and then that has sort of knock-on effects through the rest of the market. It increases home prices, it increases rents, all of these things. We're also seeing pull through from the consumer side of the equation, which is your renters and people who are buying houses are looking for these sorts of technologies. And they have different reasons for doing it, right? Like Arch was saying, you need a sexy product, right? Absolutely. There's a certain level of sexiness factor in a lot of these things where you can give someone a demo on a walkthrough on a brand new house of, adjusting what plugs are getting backed up. And believe me, that's going to allow that house to show very well. So long story short is that many of these technologies that we're seeing in this market are no longer just an ethical imperative. Like on a P&L basis for you as a building owner, on a sort of margin return, if you're a building constructor and just selling homes, many of these technologies, like the three that we've shown today, just make good dollars and cents sense, right? They allow you to sell these buildings for more. They allow you to operate them more cheaply. They allow you to access lower cost of capital, potentially lower insurance, things like that. So long story short, I think we're at a bit of a tipping point here where no longer is it that we just need to do these things because it's good for the planet. Obviously it is good for the planet, but where they're starting to just make a good economic sense. Okay.
Great. No, I appreciate that. It's right on. It's all about like you said, it's flowing through to the P&L now. So it makes it much easier conversation internally. So with that, I just want to say thanks again and wrap everything up here. Appreciate all of our presenters participating. I appreciate Greg helping us line this conversation up. Look forward to all the follow-on content that comes out of it. We will be featuring a series of market engagement activities at the International Builders Show, first week of February. So for those of you that will be attending, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be able to guide you in the direction of where we'll be either speaking up on the education stage or participating in the show village. We also have our third Tuesday event for February coming up. It's going to be all about consumer expectations and offsite construction. So it's really about how consumers are now getting, with all the commonality and conversation around offsite and advanced methods of construction, how consumers are starting to demand that from their builders and partners. So I think this is something that we're excited to see come to the surface and looking forward to sharing that with everyone. So with that, again, everyone have a great morning, great afternoon. We'll circle back with you again soon. Have a great day.
Cheers.